Imagine standing at the edge of everything you ever wanted: love, peace, fulfillment, and yet some invisible force inside you pulls you back. You can almost touch happiness, but somehow you find a way to sabotage it, again and again and again. You're not alone. This is the hidden tragedy most people live without ever realizing. The real battle isn't out there, in the world. It's happening inside you. Every time you dream bigger, love deeper, or reach higher, an unconscious part of you whispers, "You don't deserve this. You're not ready. You're safer staying small." Today we're going to expose that voice. We're going to pull it into the light piece by piece, no matter how painful it gets. Because if you don't confront the forces inside you, they will keep stealing your happiness, no matter how much you achieve, no matter how hard you try. This video is not about blaming you. It's about understanding you at the deepest level, beyond the masks, beyond the defense mechanisms, beyond the stories you've been told. Together, we'll dive into the unconscious patterns that drive self-sabotage, where they come from, and most importantly, how you can finally break free. Because real happiness isn't something you stumble into. It's something you have to fight for within yourself. Let's begin. On the surface, you know exactly what you want. You want happiness, you want love, you want success. You envision a better version of yourself, living a life of fulfillment and meaning. You set goals, you dream big, you promise yourself, "This time will be different." And consciously you believe it. Every step forward feels like a declaration of your willpower. But beneath that conscious mind, hidden deep within the recesses of your psyche, there is another force at work, a silent force, one that clings to the old, the familiar, and the safe. This unconscious force doesn't trust happiness. It doesn't trust success. It doesn't even trust love. It only trusts what it knows, even if what it knows is pain. This invisible war between what you consciously desire and what you unconsciously fear is the source of so much inner conflict. Imagine trying to drive a car with one foot on the gas and the other on the brake. No matter how hard you press forward, something inside you resists. The brake pedal isn't broken. It's your unconscious mind screaming, "Stay where it's safe. Don't risk the unknown." And so you find yourself hesitating, procrastinating, choosing partners, jobs, and lifestyles that feel strangely comfortable in their misery. This is not weakness. It's ancient programming, the mind's way of protecting you from what it perceives as dangerous, even when the danger is simply the unfamiliar joy you crave. Carl Jung famously said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What you call bad luck or poor choices is often your unconscious pulling the strings. You're not just battling circumstances, you're battling an internal narrative that believes happiness is unsafe, undeserved, or unattainable. And unless you recognize this war within you, you will unconsciously sabotage every step forward. You will find ways to retreat just as things are getting better. Not because you're broken, but because your unconscious mind is loyal to your survival, even at the cost of your happiness. The truth is unsettling but freeing. You are not fighting against yourself because you are flawed. You are fighting because you are split. A part of you is still frozen in the past, still terrified of the unknown, still clinging to the old pains that shaped you. To move forward, you don't just need motivation. You need reconciliation. You must bridge the gap between your conscious dreams and your unconscious fears. You must teach the fearful parts of yourself that happiness is no longer a threat, that growth is not abandonment, that love is not danger. Only then will the war inside you begin to quiet, and only then will true happiness become possible. Long before you had the words to describe it, you were absorbing the silent rules of the world around you. Every look, every tone of voice, every unspoken expectation shaped your internal map of what was possible and what was not. If you grew up in an environment where love was conditional, approval was rare, or emotional needs were neglected, you internalized a devastating message: I am not worthy of happiness. This belief doesn't announce itself loudly. It whispers from the shadows. It colors your choices, your relationships, and even your sense of what is normal. You learn not to expect too much, not to dream too big, not to trust that good things will last. Childhood isn't just a stage of life, it's where your deepest emotional blueprints are drawn, and if left unexamined, those blueprints quietly govern you for the rest of your life. This isn't about blaming parents or guardians. Most of them were simply repeating the patterns they themselves inherited. But understanding how these early experiences shaped you is essential if you ever hope to free yourself from them. If love was unpredictable or absent, you may unconsciously seek out partners who make you earn their affection. If achievement was the only way to receive attention, you may believe that your worth is tied to constant performance. If emotional expression was punished or ignored, you may have learned to silence your own needs altogether. Happiness then becomes not just unlikely, it feels alien, unsafe, unreal. And the tragic irony is that even when happiness does find you, part of you will sabotage it because it doesn't fit the emotional world you were conditioned to expect. Carl Jung emphasized that the unconscious is a repository of forgotten experiences, emotions, and beliefs that continue to live and act within us, even when we are unaware of them. Your inner child, the emotional being you once were, still carries those early wounds, and unless those wounds are acknowledged and healed, they operate in the background like invisible scripts that tell you you're too much, or not enough, that you must suffer to be good, that joy is temporary and always ends in betrayal. These scripts are powerful not because they are true, but because they were written before you had the power to question them. And so they endure, shaping your adult life with the ghostly hands of a forgotten past. Healing requires a conscious, courageous act of rebellion against these old scripts. It demands that you stop accepting inherited beliefs as facts, that you question the silent rules you absorbed about love, worth, and joy. It asks you to confront the terrifying possibility that you were always deserving but were taught otherwise. This confrontation can feel like betrayal, betraying the family myths, the cultural stories, the inner critic who tried to protect you. But in truth, it is an act of profound loyalty to yourself. Only by reparenting your inner child, only by offering compassion, where once there was neglect, can you begin to dismantle the hidden belief that you don't deserve happiness. And when you do, you begin to unlock a life that no longer has to be built around old wounds, but can instead be built around your birthright to heal, grow, and thrive. At first glance, it seems absurd. Why would anyone choose suffering over joy? Why would we cling to pain, even when better possibilities are within reach? The answer lies deep within the architecture of the psyche. Familiarity breeds comfort, even when that familiarity is rooted in misery. From a psychological standpoint, the human mind craves predictability. Pain that you know is, in a strange way, safer than happiness you don't trust. If you grew up expecting disappointment, betrayal, or loss, then joy feels like a dangerous unknown, a fragile illusion that could shatter at any moment. Better, your unconscious reasons to stick with the devil you know than risk vulnerability in the arms of something that could vanish. In this way, suffering becomes a protective shell, painful but predictable, and predictability for the wounded mind feels a lot like safety. Carl Jung observed that neurosis is always a substitute for legitimate suffering. In other words, we unconsciously create repetitive patterns of low-grade suffering to avoid the deeper, more transformative pain of real change. Choosing familiar pain is a way of avoiding the profound fear that real happiness might demand something terrifying, the death of your old self. To open your heart to joy, means to risk its loss. To pursue a new life means letting go of the identity you've clung to, even if that identity is built around suffering. Many people, without realizing it, would rather live inside a story of struggle because at least they know how that story ends. Joy, by contrast, is a blank page, and blank pages are terrifying for those who have never been taught how to write a new story for themselves. When you reach for something better, whether it's a healthier relationship, a fulfilling career, or a deeper sense of peace, you may find yourself gripped by inexplicable anxiety or self-sabotaging behaviors. You might start a promising new relationship only to pick fights over small things. You might get a job you dreamed of, only to convince yourself you're an imposter. This isn't because you're weak or broken, it's because your unconscious mind is screaming, "This is unfamiliar, this is unsafe." The body and mind are programmed to seek equilibrium, even if that equilibrium is toxic. Breaking free from the gravity of familiar pain isn't simply a matter of willpower. It requires deep, conscious reprogramming of what safety even means to you. Recognizing that you seek comfort in pain is the first painful step toward liberation. It demands brutal honesty, acknowledging that you have mistaken suffering for stability, that the cage you sit in feels like home only because you have never been shown the door. Healing means daring to feel unsafe. It means stepping into the unfamiliar terrain of joy, love, and fulfillment without guarantees. It means realizing that true safety does not come from control or repetition. It comes from resilience, from knowing that even if you lose what you love, you are strong enough to survive and rebuild. Suffering will always whisper its siren song of familiarity. But once you taste the freedom of true happiness, the old melodies of pain begin to lose their grip. Hidden in the corridors of the unconscious is a figure few dare to confront: the saboteur. This archetype isn't evil, but it is destructive. Its goal isn't to ruin your life, it's to protect you from what it perceives as danger. Ironically, that danger is often your own growth, happiness, and potential. The saboteur was born in moments when risk led to pain, when vulnerability led to betrayal, when hope was punished instead of rewarded. It learned that dreaming was dangerous, that reaching out led to hurt, and that standing out invited attack. So, over time, it made a sacred vow to protect you, not by helping you succeed, but by keeping you small, hidden, and safe. The tragedy is that the saboteur is both loyal and blind. It cannot see that in protecting you from imaginary dangers, it is also keeping you from the life you are meant to live. The saboteur doesn't announce itself with fanfare. It moves in shadows, whispering thoughts of self-doubt, manufacturing obstacles, pulling you back just as you begin to surge forward. It convinces you that you're not ready, not good enough, not deserving. It triggers procrastination, perfectionism, or sudden disinterest in your dreams. It builds a fortress of excuses. Now isn't the right time. Maybe I'm not cut out for this. What if I fail? These are not random thoughts. They are the calculated strategies of the saboteur, trying to keep you tethered to what is known, predictable, and safe. The cruelty of it all is that the saboteur speaks in your own voice. It wears your face, so you believe it. You mistake it for truth. And by doing so, you unconsciously hand over the keys to your own imprisonment. To dismantle the power of the saboteur, you must first recognize it, not as an enemy to be vanquished, but as a wounded guardian to be understood. It is trying to protect a version of you that no longer exists, the child who was hurt, the young adult who was betrayed, the self that once couldn't defend itself. You are not that person anymore. You have outgrown those original wounds, but the saboteur has not yet gotten the message. Awareness is the first rebellion. Start noticing when you hear the old scripts of doubt and fear. Ask yourself, whose voice is this, really? Whose pain am I carrying? Whose fear am I still obeying? With compassion, not condemnation, you begin to loosen the saboteur's grip, not by waging war against it, but by reassuring it that you are strong enough now to walk into the unknown. Healing the relationship with your saboteur transforms it from a jailer into an ally. When you approach it with understanding, you can teach it new lessons, that vulnerability can lead to connection, that risk can bring reward, that failure is not annihilation but evolution. Over time, the saboteur can become the guardian of your authenticity, protecting you not by keeping you small, but by helping you discern which risks are life-giving and which are merely reckless. Carl Jung said that we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. To meet your saboteur is to step into your own darkness and to find hidden there not a monster, but a scared protector waiting to be released from duty. Change sounds beautiful in theory. We romanticize transformation in movies, books, and speeches. Yet when it knocks on our door, we shrink back in fear. Real change demands more than adjustments to behavior or attitude. It demands a death. The death of who you were. The death of identities you have clung to for safety, of stories you have told yourself to make sense of your pain, of relationships and routines that defined your comfort zone. Carl Jung taught that the process of individuation, the journey to becoming who you truly are, requires confronting and letting go of the false self you've constructed. This false self was necessary for survival at one point, but it becomes a prison if you refuse to outgrow it. True happiness cannot coexist with the clinging to an outdated version of yourself. To step into joy, you must be willing to lay the old self to rest. This is why change feels so terrifying. It's not just about uncertainty, it's about grief. Grieving the parts of you that were familiar, even if they were painful. Grieving the identity you spent years building, even if it was never truly yours. You are not just afraid of what the future holds. You are afraid of the mourning that change demands. Happiness asks you to sacrifice your old patterns of suffering, your old ways of being small, your old excuses. And part of you resists because these patterns feel like home. They are the known. They are the devil you know. The idea of becoming someone new, even someone free, someone happy, feels like annihilation. But it isn't death you are facing. It is a rebirth. And every true rebirth begins with a symbolic death, a letting go so deep that it shakes you to your core. When you find yourself sabotaging your progress, hesitating on the brink of a breakthrough, it is often because the old self senses its own extinction, and it fights back. It throws every fear it can muster into your path. It tries to convince you that happiness is unsafe, that you are not ready, that change will cost you too much. In truth, the only thing you are being asked to give up is your chains. But to the old self, the chains have become jewelry. They are decorated with the meaning of years, with memories, with identities stitched out of suffering. The old self doesn't want to die because it believes its death means your death. But you are not your fear. You are not your past. You are the living soul buried beneath all the layers of defense. And happiness is not something you achieve by force. It is something you uncover by surrendering what no longer serves you. There comes a moment when you must choose comfort or transformation. Comfort offers predictability, safety, and slow decay. Transformation offers uncertainty, discomfort, and life. Real happiness does not come from clinging to the familiar. It comes from having the courage to release it. It comes from trusting that what is meant to survive will survive, and what must die will die for your liberation. This is not a path for the faint of heart. It demands radical honesty, radical grief, and radical trust. But on the other side of that death is not a void. It is a homecoming, a return to a self that is vast, free, and alive. As you step through the fire of change, you are not being punished. You are being initiated. You are being called back to your essence. And that is the real path to happiness. The willingness to die to who you were, so you can finally live as who you are. Shame and guilt are emotions so quiet, so insidious, that many people live under their weight without even realizing it. They seep into the way you speak to yourself, into the dreams you dare not pursue, into the love you think you do not deserve. Carl Jung observed that what remains unconscious controls our lives, and shame is one of the most potent unconscious forces. It's not simply feeling bad for something you've done, it's feeling fundamentally bad for who you are. Guilt says, I made a mistake. Shame says, I am a mistake. And when shame burrows itself into your identity, it creates an invisible ceiling over your happiness. No matter how much good comes into your life, there's always a voice, whispering that you are unworthy of it. And slowly, that voice becomes the architect of your self-sabotage. Many of our earliest experiences of shame are planted during childhood. A parent's harsh words, a teacher's dismissive tone, a moment of humiliation in front of peers, all of these moments accumulate, silently teaching us that certain parts of ourselves are unacceptable. We internalize this lesson so deeply that we carry it into adulthood, wearing masks to hide the flaws we fear others will reject. But what we don't realize is that these masks don't just hide our wounds, they hide our brilliance too. They keep us trapped in a perpetual loop, striving for worthiness through external achievements, but never feeling truly at peace. Happiness becomes something we believe must be earned through perfection, through endless penance, and even when success comes, shame whispers that it was a mistake, that we are imposters living on borrowed time. Guilt, on the other hand, has the potential to be redemptive when it arises from genuine wrongdoing. It can guide us toward empathy, responsibility, and growth. But when guilt festers, when it is disproportionate, misplaced, or weaponized against ourselves, it mutates into self-punishment. We become our own jailers, crafting a reality where we must constantly atone for crimes we never committed. We reject joy, not because life withholds it, but because we unconsciously believe we do not deserve it. Relationships, opportunities, moments of peace, they slip through our fingers, not because we lack the capacity to hold them, but because part of us still clings to the narrative that says, good things are not for me. Until we confront the roots of our shame and guilt, we will continue to unconsciously sabotage every path that leads toward happiness. Healing from shame and guilt does not happen by willing yourself to be positive. It begins by dragging these silent saboteurs into the light. It requires radical self-compassion, looking at the parts of yourself you have deemed unworthy and choosing to love them anyway. It means understanding that you are not broken, you were wounded. It means realizing that the standards you judge yourself by were never yours to begin with. Shame and guilt lose their power when they are spoken aloud, when they are met, not with condemnation but with tenderness. You are not obligated to live a life of quiet suffering. Joy is not a reward you earn by being flawless. It is your birthright. And reclaiming it starts with forgiving yourself. Not for being imperfect, but for believing you ever needed to be anything else. From childhood, we are sold a vision of happiness that looks suspiciously flawless, like a glossy magazine cover, where everyone is smiling, every problem is solved, and life finally reaches a peak moment that stays frozen in perfection. It's an alluring dream, but a dangerous one. When we internalize the idea that happiness should be a static, perfect state, anything less feels like failure. We become convinced that happiness is something to chase, capture, and preserve indefinitely, not realizing that real life doesn't work that way. Carl Jung warned against the pursuit of external ideals at the expense of inner truth. When happiness becomes a fantasy of perfection, we are set up to constantly feel disappointed, even when life is genuinely good. Every minor inconvenience, every fleeting sadness feels like a threat to our imagined paradise. And so, ironically, the pursuit of perfect happiness becomes the very thing that robs us of real joy. This myth is perpetuated not just by culture, but by our own need for certainty. It's comforting to believe that there is a final destination where we will finally be okay, where no fear, sadness, or conflict will ever touch us again. But in reality, happiness is fluid, dynamic, and deeply imperfect. It lives in fleeting moments, in the small and often messy experiences that don't fit neatly into any fantasy. Jung emphasized the necessity of integrating opposites, light and shadow, joy and sorrow, triumph and loss. To be fully alive is to feel the full spectrum of human experience, not just the moments we deem acceptable. When we reject the natural ebb and flow of life in favor of an unattainable ideal, we don't just sabotage our happiness, we disconnect from life itself. Moreover, the myth of perfect happiness creates a cruel secondary effect: the shame of not being happy enough. When you believe happiness should be constant, any experience of sadness, doubt, or anxiety feels like a personal failure. You start to wonder, what's wrong with me? This self-recrimination creates an emotional feedback loop where unhappiness breeds shame, and shame deepens unhappiness. It's a vicious cycle. The truth is, there is nothing wrong with you for feeling human emotions. Pain is not a deviation from life, it is part of it. Grief, frustration, longing, they are not signs that you are broken. They are signs that you are alive. True happiness is not the absence of all discomfort, but the ability to hold your pain and your joy together, without rejecting either. It is found not in escaping the human condition, but in embracing it. Escaping the myth of perfect happiness requires a radical redefinition of what it means to live well. It asks us to see happiness not as a permanent state, but as a collection of living, breathing moments. It demands that we give ourselves permission to feel joy, even when life is messy, unresolved, or incomplete. Jung's process of individuation is exactly this: the integration of all parts of the self, not just the parts we like. To be whole is to be able to sit with contradiction, to hold both sorrow and gratitude in the same hand. It is to stop measuring life by some invisible, impossible standard, and instead to fully inhabit the messy, miraculous now. You are not failing because your life isn't perfect. You are succeeding every time you choose to stay present, to feel, to love, and to live authentically, imperfections and all. Imagine living inside a story you don't even realize you're writing, a story shaped by your hidden fears, doubts, and assumptions. This is the essence of the self-fulfilling prophecy. The mind, powerful and suggestible, tends to find exactly what it expects. If deep down you believe you're destined to fail, your actions, your perceptions, and your choices will unconsciously align to make that failure a reality. It's not magic, it's psychology. Carl Jung described this phenomenon when he said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life, and you will call it fate." What we fear most often becomes the reality we live, not because life conspires against us, but because we unknowingly conspire against ourselves. Every hesitation, every avoidance, every misinterpreted sign along the way pulls us closer to the destiny our unconscious mind expects. Self-fulfilling prophecies thrive in the subtle, invisible corners of our lives. They show up in how we interpret others' behavior, how we pursue or abandon opportunities, and how we engage with relationships. For example, if you carry a deep-seated fear that people will eventually reject you, you may behave in guarded, distant ways that inadvertently push people away. When the inevitable happens, it seems to confirm your fear. when in truth your fear was silently scripting the outcome all along. Jung's concept of projection is key here. We project our inner expectations onto the outer world and then react to them as if they were objective reality. The danger is not merely in believing something negative, it's in acting as though it's already true, shaping your life around a reality that didn't have to exist. There's a particularly cruel twist to self-fulfilling prophecies, the emotional payoff. Even when the outcome is painful, it feels strangely validating to see the world match our expectations. That validation, however bitter, reinforces the inner narrative. It's a dangerous comfort zone, a closed feedback loop where fear breeds. Evidence and evidence deepens fear. This is why simply thinking positive rarely works, because beneath surface-level affirmations, deeper, older narratives remain untouched. To break the cycle, one must do the hard, often painful work of confronting the unconscious beliefs that drive behavior. Jung called this the confrontation with the shadow, the recognition of the disowned parts of ourselves that quietly dictate our lives. Without this confrontation, we remain prisoners of a story we didn't consciously choose. The way out begins with awareness. By observing your patterns without judgment, you start to loosen the grip of the unconscious. Instead of immediately reacting to fear-based thoughts, you can question them. Is this true? Or is it a story I'm projecting? This space between thought and action is the birthplace of freedom. Jung's path of individuation demands that we step into conscious authorship of our lives, rewriting old scripts rather than blindly living them out. You are not doomed to be the villain in your own story. You can become the author. Breaking the cycle of self-fulfilling prophecies isn't about never being afraid again. It's about refusing to let fear dictate your reality. It's about seeing the invisible war inside you and choosing day by day to write a new ending. The inner saboteur is a master of disguise. It doesn't announce itself with flashing lights and warnings. It slips into your thoughts disguised as logic or realism. It whispers that you're not ready yet, that you'll fail if you try, that you're safer staying small. Identifying this voice begins with paying close attention to the moments when you shrink back from life. Notice the excuses you make, the justifications that feel convincing but hollow. Jung taught that what we resist in ourselves often has the greatest power over us. The inner saboteur thrives in unconsciousness. It operates beneath your awareness, steering you away from growth and into familiar patterns of limitation. By naming it, by shining light on its tactics, you strip it of its secret power. One powerful way to unmask the saboteur is to observe the patterns that repeat in your life. Where do you consistently fall short? In which areas do you self-sabotage? The most: relationships, career, personal dreams. These patterns are not random. They are signatures of an internal force working against you. Jung's process of active imagination can be profoundly helpful here. Instead of repressing self-sabotaging thoughts, engage with them. Give your saboteur a voice. Imagine having a conversation with it. What does it fear? What does it believe it's protecting you from? Often, you'll find that the saboteur is not evil. It's a part of you frozen in an outdated survival strategy, still trying to protect a version of you that no longer exists. Confronting the saboteur isn't about silencing it, it's about integrating it. If you meet it with hatred or shame, you only drive it deeper into the unconscious, where it will continue its sabotage unseen. Jung emphasized that healing doesn't come from suppression. It comes from relationship. Approach your inner saboteur with curiosity and compassion. See it not as an enemy, but as a wounded part of yourself that needs acknowledgement and new guidance. By doing this, you transform the saboteur from an unconscious saboteur into a conscious ally. You move from being controlled by fear to working with the parts of yourself that once tried to keep you safe in destructive ways. Real confrontation with the saboteur demands daily vigilance. It's not a one-time battle. It's an ongoing practice of self-awareness. Each time you catch yourself holding back, procrastinating, giving up too soon, pause. Ask, is this fear? Or is this truth? Is this my intuition? Or is it my inner saboteur clinging to old wounds? Over time, as you continue this dialogue, your saboteur loses its grip. It no longer operates from the shadows, dictating your life without your consent. You reclaim agency. You step into the individuation process Jung spoke of, becoming whole, integrating the exiled parts of yourself into a stronger, more authentic being. Facing the saboteur is one of the most courageous acts of self-liberation, and it marks a profound turning point on the path to true happiness. The final step in overcoming self-sabotage and reclaiming your happiness is rewriting the narrative. You've been telling yourself, for years, you may have believed that happiness was a distant dream, something that only happens to other people, or something you need to earn. This narrative is rooted in old beliefs, childhood conditioning, and societal expectations that happiness is a privilege, not a right. But what if happiness were simply the natural state of being, something that you were born deserving of? Reclaiming happiness means letting go of the false stories that have kept you stuck in a cycle of unworthiness. It involves recognizing that your happiness isn't something to be earned, it's something to be embraced simply because you are alive. Building a new narrative starts with identifying the core beliefs that have been dictating your life. These beliefs, often shaped by past trauma or societal pressures, serve as the lens through which you see yourself and the world. Do you believe that happiness is fleeting or that you're destined to suffer? Perhaps you think you're not worthy of a joyful life. To rewrite your story, you need to challenge these beliefs. Start by asking yourself, what would it look like if I believed I was worthy of happiness right now? What would change if I allowed myself to feel good, to pursue joy without guilt or fear of failure? Your narrative will shift when you begin to question the false stories you've internalized, and it will shift dramatically when you allow yourself the possibility of something new. The process of building a new narrative involves taking small but deliberate actions that reinforce this new belief system. Happiness isn't an abstract concept. It's a practice. You need to engage with it, experiment with it, and make space for it in your everyday life. This might mean practicing self-compassion when you make mistakes, instead of falling into shame. It might involve setting boundaries that honor your emotional and mental well-being, or taking risks that align with your passions. Each action you take that supports your happiness rewrites your story, piece by piece. Over time, as you begin to live this new narrative, you will start to notice a shift in your internal world. Happiness becomes less of a goal and more of a state of being, a natural result of living in alignment with your true self. Finally, as you build your new narrative, remember that it's not about achieving some perfect version of happiness. It's about being willing to embrace the full spectrum of human experience, the highs and the lows, and to trust that you are deserving of joy, no matter your past or your struggles. In the end, your new narrative is about sovereignty. You reclaim your right to be happy, not because you've achieved perfection, but because you've accepted yourself, flaws and all. This is what Jung meant by individuation, the process of becoming who you truly are, free from the limitations imposed by external influences or internal fears. Your new narrative is the story of a person who knows their worth and is committed to living authentically. And when you live this way, happiness no longer feels like an impossible dream. It becomes a powerful, constant presence in your life. As we come to the end of this journey into understanding why we sabotage our own happiness, it becomes clear that the path to true fulfillment isn't about seeking external solutions or waiting for the right circumstances to align. The real journey lies within. It is about facing the internal forces, our fears, our doubts, our shame, that have kept us stuck in cycles of self-sabotage. It's about rewriting the stories we've been telling ourselves for years and choosing to step into the truth of who we really are. Throughout this video, we've explored how childhood conditioning, unconscious fears, and societal pressures shape our perceptions of happiness. We've uncovered the hidden archetypes that keep us trapped in destructive patterns and the silent emotions that erode our joy. But perhaps the most important takeaway is this: happiness is not something we need to earn, it's our birthright. Reclaiming your happiness is an act of courage. It means confronting your inner saboteur, embracing the uncomfortable truths about yourself, and allowing yourself to experience joy, even when it feels unfamiliar. It's about choosing to let go of the past and build a new narrative, one where happiness is not a fleeting, impossible dream, but a natural and constant companion. Remember, the journey of healing is not linear. There will be setbacks, moments of doubt, and times when it feels like you're not making progress. But if you continue to show up for yourself, keep challenging the stories you've told yourself, and take small steps toward embracing your worth, you will find that happiness is not just a destination, it's the life you are meant to live. So, take a deep breath and let go of the belief that happiness is reserved for someone else. It's time to embrace it as your own. The path isn't forward, it's inward. And the more you travel that path, the more you will discover a life full of peace, joy, and authenticity. Thank you for watching, and remember, you are worthy of every bit of happiness that comes your way.